Give us a little more context here on Gary Cohn being completely ruled out as the likely Fed chair. We had just discussed how relations between him and the president had been strained after the president's remarks about what happened in Charlottesville.
Well, President Trump does not intend to nominate Gary Cohn to the Federal Reserve Board as chairman, according to several sources that my colleague Jennifer Jacobs and I have spoken to. Now, of course, this comes after the relationship between Mr. Cohn as well as President Trump has become a bit more tense, to say the least, in the past several months. And so as a result of that, we should also note that President Trump told Lou Dobbs in a Fox Business Network interview scheduled to air later this evening that he has limited his decision on who he will select to the Federal Reserve Board to about 2 or 3 choices. So, of course, we've been carefully monitoring the situation, and it looks like someone like a Jay Powell or a John Taylor, to some extent Kevin Warsh, and yes, even Janet Yellen, the current Fed chair, are still in the running.
Is there any sense there, Kevin, who is the front runner among that group that you just named? Because there's good reason to think that each could actually receive the nomination. But are you hearing any inside word today? Changes each day,
that's a great point. You know, and in covering Trump since practically the beginning of this campaign, I've learned don't predict anything with Donald Trump. And so I can tell you that the competing factions surrounding President Trump are interesting in who they are pulling for. And we should note that the vice chair position at the central bank is also open. And that is why the president last week telling Fox Business that there could be a 1-2 combination, so to speak, because I've spoken with several sources connected to the vice president's office, as well as to more conservative factions in the conservative movement within the House Freedom Caucus, so to speak, and yes, even the House Financial Services Committee. They like John Taylor. John Taylor, of course, someone who has advocated for the so-called Taylor rule, getting rid of a rules-based, advocating rather for a rules-based approach to the central bank. He did give public remarks suggesting that he would ease off being so adamant about impacting that type of policy. But someone like a Jay Powell or a Kevin Warsh, perhaps a more centrist pick, and yes, even Janet Yellen. We should note that Chair Yellen has received compliments from President Trump within the last week.
And of course, we know the president has said that he'll make a decision very, very soon. He's likely to make his announcement before he leaves on his Asia trip on November 3rd. I want to go back to Gary Cohn for a moment here because of the breaking news. What do we know about Gary Cohn and his longevity at the White House? Right now, he's in charge of tax reform.
Well, he's a part of a team that is in charge of tax reform.
Fair enough.
And and that's a great point. And I think that the reporting that I've done and the sources that I've spoken with have suggested that his influence in crafting tax reform is very much a part of a team, led, of course, also by people like Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, who is traveling as we speak in Saudi Arabia. And Gary Cohn will not be on the Asia trip, I'm told, and instead will be focusing on tax reform. He's going to be meeting with members of the Republican Study Committee next week on November 1st here on Capitol Hill. He's definitely been meeting with lawmakers, but we should note about the increasing role of people like here in Congress, lawmakers here on Congress, such as, Representative Kevin Brady. Look, Gary Cohn has frequently advocated for pay-fors that have been controversial here on Capitol Hill, such as the state and local tax deduction, and said that would be a $1.3 trillion source of revenue for the tax plan. Yesterday at the Economic Club, Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross said that tweaks to the state and local tax deduction are on the table. And so I would also note that Secretary Ross is also a part of that team as well. So there are a lot of folks crafting that tax policy. There's intense speculation about how long Gary Cohn, who declined comment for our story, will be at the White House and within the administration. It'll be interesting to see. But there is no question that the administration is on pace right now to get tax reform done, if not by the end of the year, by the first month of next.